Welcome to Menopause Moguls podcast, the Elevation Talk series, with yours truly, Dr. Joyelle. I am Dr. Joyelle, the Menopause Mogul, board certified OBGYN and business coach for Black women 40 and over. And my mission is to educate, embolden, and empower Black women and other women of color in their journey through health and careers. This is a space for Black women and other women of color to share their compelling trials and tribulations in their health and or in their careers and businesses. This is where we recognize the humanity of Black women and show how Black women continue to elevate despite midlife challenges and changes. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Menopause Moguls with yours truly, Dr. Joyelle, the Menopause Mogul, your menopause and midlife wellness strategist and business coach for midlife women. Hey, y'all. Today, I wanted to talk about how an identity crisis can enhance your midlife journey. Yeah, that's what I said. An identity crisis can enhance your midlife journey, which may sound a little crazy, right? But an identity crisis, I think it is very prevalent, especially in these midlife years, right? And I feel like, I know that there are some of you who want to, outside of what you're doing right now, also want to build a business. And some of you haven't made the move or took the steps to build it because you haven't accepted the identity of a business owner, of an entrepreneur. And some of you are struggling with your menopausal symptoms, getting frustrated, and feel like you're in a bind. And some of you may be in that position because you haven't accepted the identity of a perimenopausal or menopausal woman. And I wanted to talk about an identity crisis, just your identity in general. Like I said, in menopause, it can change dramatically. Now, I put in my IG stories how I was just driving, wondering when I became an Uber driver. When did I become an Uber driver, y'all? Like, when did that happen? When did that happen? And when did I become bruh? Right? Like, it was like mommy, ma, now I'm bruh. Like, I am just totally like, when did this occur? Like, no one gave me the memo that I was going to become an Uber driver, become bruh as a working mom, right? Like, so how does this happen? How does this happen? But it just made me just think back to when I started my perimenopausal journey. And there were so many changes, in my body, physically, mentally, that I really did not recognize myself. I'm like, who is this person? Who is this person? And not even before that, becoming a mom, that also changed my identity, right? Like, I was Joyelle before, Dr. Joyelle before, and and then I became Jocelyn's mom. That was my name. Jocelyn's mom, and then Simone's mom, and then Justin's mom. Like, so, you get to a point where you're like, well, who am I? Who am I again? Who am I? Um, and like I said, when I was going through these changes, I really did not recognize myself. And it was just so many things that were just foreign to me. And I know a lot of women can experience that when they're going through perimenopause, menopause, their body's changing mentally, physically, emotionally, and they feel like they're losing how they used to feel, how they used to act, how they used to think. And it all becomes foreign. And you're like, okay, who is this person? Who is this person? And sometimes you get to a point where you feel like you're doubting, like, oh my gosh, am I a good mother? Am I good at my career because of the menopausal symptoms that you may be experiencing. And I remember just, going from being a doctor who was in clinical practice to an entrepreneur. I That transition was difficult for me because I felt like, oh my gosh, like people know me as a doctor. Who am I now? Who am I now? And having your identity attached to certain things, especially to what you do, and then when you stop doing that or you are in the act of moving away from that, that causes some stress. That causes you to sometimes hold yourself back and shrink down. Like, okay, no, let me just go back to where who I used to be because that's what I'm used to. That was comfortable, right? So being able to um, you know, get in this transition and now trying to figure out, okay, who am I? And at the same time, as I become this next person, am I still worthy? Right? Because again, like as a doctor, I helped so many women, right? And their families. And then now as an entrepreneur, like, can I do the same thing? Like, can it happen? Um, so I know that is something that a lot of women can struggle with as they are going through these midlife changes and challenges. And I was listening to a sermon a few Sundays ago, and it was Pastor Tori Roberts, and the title of the sermon was called Identity Crisis. So this came up for me again, like, oh my gosh, what is he going to talk about? So he talked about, how identity crisis come into play and actually how the crisis doesn't really have to be a negative connotation with it. It actually means the word crisis actually means in Latin decision. And I looked it up. I'm like, really? So I had to look it up. I'm like, let me just confirm this before I go telling y'all. So I looked it up and it was in medical Latin. It says, it's spelled crisis with a K. Crisis in Greek meant decision. And I'm like, that's very interesting. So when you think about having an identity crisis, it really puts you in a position to make a decision, right? It comes down to making a decision as you are going through these changes mentally, physically, emotionally, as you are now trying to transition into entrepreneurship. It really comes down to a decision. And it doesn't have to be like this identity crisis. Oh my gosh, like it's this most horrible thing in the world. It actually gives us the opportunity to really step back and pause, right? And look inward to figure out, what do I want? What do I need? Who am I now and who am I becoming? Right? So it puts us in that position, which really can enhance our journey as we go into these midlife years because it gives us the opportunity to again really be still with ourselves and do the things that actually align with who we are and who we want to be, right? So, in the sermon, he said, God knows he can't get greatness out of you if you don't see greatness on you. And I thought that was so powerful, right? God knows he can't get greatness out of you if you don't see greatness on you. So if we don't accept the identity of being an entrepreneur, if we don't accept the identity of being okay, now I'm perimenopausal. And that's not a bad thing, right? So we have to accept those things in order to continue to move forward, to take the steps to align with that identity, right? And a lot of times when we think about, making a decision about who we are, who we're going to be, and who we are becoming, that decision comes with letting go of things, right? Letting go of who you used to be, some things that you used to do. For me, I was so used to being on autopilot, being on that hamster wheel. Wake up, wake the kids up, make sure my husband wakes up, um, make sure breakfast is ready, get them off to school or daycare, and then I go to work, see my patients. Um, at the end of the work, go pick up the kids, come home, make dinner, go to bed, and then wake back up and do it all over again. And my goal throughout the day was making sure everybody else was good, whether it's my husband, my children, my patients, my colleagues. I didn't want to impinge on any of, if I had to, change something, change a time, change something in my office hours that may affect them, or if I was on call and I had to do something before I went on a call, I didn't want to like, okay, can you stay a little bit later? Like all these things. So I wanted to just make sure that everybody else was good and really did not take the time to do things for me, like at all. Like I didn't do anything for me. And at the same time, now I was then, beginning to experience all of these changes in my body and just ignoring them. Like, I don't have time to address this right now. Right? Like I look this is probably perimenopause and I don't have time. I don't have time because I have things to do. I have kids to take care of. I have patients to take care of. I don't have time to address these night sweats that is making me feel disgusting every morning. I don't have time to um do the things that I probably should be doing in order to actually feel better because I felt like again I needed to make sure everybody else was good. I was not used to taking care of me. I was not used to putting me first because I grew up as the oldest of 8 children, and I'm used to again taking care of everybody else and making sure everybody else is good, setting the example. So I got on that hamster wheel of doing that day in and day out. And also at the same time, I had high blood pressure after my third pregnancy, was on medication for it. And my primary care doctor was like, girl, she was the sister and, we became friends. She's like, girl, what are you doing? Like, you need to, and I'm like, I don't really feel like taking this medication. So, well, you need to do something about it then. She was like, what are you doing for self-care? I'm like, self-care who? Like, what does that mean? Like, I don't have time. And meanwhile, I'm preaching self-care in my office, right? To my patients, like, girl, take care of yourself. Okay, listen, all right? I was not the best of patients. As if y'all don't know, doctors are the worst patients. So I'm like, doc, I can't. I don't have time to do self care. She's like, well, you're gonna be on this blood pressure medicine. I don't know what else to tell you. I don't know what else to tell you. So eventually, I had to decide on doing it all differently, right? I had to decide to prioritize me. I had to make that decision to prioritize me. I had to accept that, okay, yes, I'm in perimenopause and I'm going to do the things that I need to do to actually thrive through this as opposed to barely surviving, right? Um, and I started to feel better, and eventually got off that blood pressure medicine, right? Which was awesome. And then now I then wanted to now transition into becoming an entrepreneur. And, outside of that being scary as hell, I'm like, I don't think I want to, take on that responsibility. Right? Like actually build a business and maybe get some employees and be in charge of other people. Like, I didn't really think I can do that, right? So I didn't really do the things, take those steps initially to build the business. I'm like, I didn't really want to accept that identity. I didn't want to accept that I can actually become an entrepreneur. Even after, being in practice for, almost 13 years. Um, so I had to really, again, look inward and look at the woman who I actually was supposed to be becoming. But I was fighting it because I didn't want to accept it, right? I didn't want to accept the responsibility. Um, and I just didn't want to. And I also at the same time as I was, again, just kind of moving forward, and thinking about who I am, at that in that season of my life, and then who I was becoming, I also had to be open to my identity evolving. So through those years, from the start of my perimenopause journey up to now, my identity continues to evolve, right? And also keeping in mind our identities is so influenced by so many other things, right? Our families, our friends, our social networks, the things that we do, all of these things impact our identity. But as we realize that, we also have to be open to our identity actually evolving, and it being reshaped as we are feeling differently when we're aging and feeling differently when we are in, perimenopause going through this journey. Our identity actually can be reshaped gradually over time because of all these life changes, even with the things that we do in our families, with taking care, becoming a caregiver, that changes our identity. And, like I said, as a mom, and there's so many things, like I said, attached to, you're just not mommy. You're, like I said, you're the Uber driver. You're right? You are, I'm a baseball mom. I'm a cheer mom. Like I have all of these identities, right? Um, but I still have to be grounded in who I am outside of all of that. Who am I outside of that? And I also had to l- feel like I was still worthy, even if I wasn't doing certain things, right? Again, going back to me transitioning from being a doctor in clinical practice, now becoming a business coach, what again, an identity I was fighting to accept. Because I'm like, how do I go from doctor to business coach? Like, again, was not initially willing to accept that, y'all. But because I attached my worth to all the things I was doing as a doctor. So I had to separate all of that, and I had to really deem myself worthy, even if I did nothing, right? Not a doctor, not even a coach. I am deemed worthy just being on this earth, just being a human being. I am deemed worthy of all the things, right? But that required a process, right? That required a lot of time of, again, just being still with me and making decisions on the things that I needed in order to become what I envisioned, right? Um, and I was actually, you know, reading an article in Psychology Today, and it was called How Identity Change Happens. And it talked about 8 mechanisms coming into play when your identity is changing. And I wanted to share a little bit of that with you all. I want to talk about the first 4, right? Number 1 was greater self awareness. Now, I cannot speak loudly enough about how much self awareness is important when you are going through the menopausal transition. Because again, there's so many changes that are happening to you mentally, physically, emotionally. And if you're used to, again, just pushing through and being on autopilot, you will not be able to identify, number one, um, what actually may be triggering your symptoms or the challenges that you may have. And then number 2, actually take action and do something about it. because you're just not aware. You're, again, just used to being on autopilot, right? Um, and that also is connected to your identity, right? So if you now get off autopilot and take the opportunity to become more self-aware, um, and you may realize that the identity that you had before, like I said, for me, as this doctor who I thought that I would be there for, for the duration of my career, when I took the time to sit with myself and ask myself questions and be honest with those answers, I realized that no, my identity is now going to be attached to something else outside of being that doctor. It's attached to other things. So having that self-awareness actually, impacts how your identity is changing. And then you take action, right? You take the steps. I took the steps to become an entrepreneur. So that's number 1, greater self-awareness. Number 2 is social networks. Now, there's some studies that show that identity change, there's a link between identity change and the development of social connections or a sense of belonging, right? So thinking about, again, when we're going through the menopausal transition, a lot of us can feel isolated. We can feel like we're the only ones out here struggling. Um, we can feel like I'm going through all these changes. I cannot function like I used to in my workplace. I'm the only one, right? But when we create social networks or social connections that actually um, add to our well-being and pour into us and support us, that again supports also the identity that's evolving when you're going through these transitions, right? You have that good support network, right? So social networks. Number 3 is behavior change. Now, when we when I talk to my clients when it comes to their menopausal symptoms, we talk a lot about our responses to these things, right? What is the behavior that we have or the response that we have when a menopausal symptom, whether it's hot flash, brain fog, or whatever that thing is, comes up, right? Because that response matters. And I realized that, through my own journey, when I responded or honestly reacted with anger, frustration, when I woke up feeling disgusted after when with night sweats, after night sweats, when I had brain fog and memory loss when seeing patients in the office, I would react with anger like, God damn it, like, get it together, Joelle, and reacted with judgment. So if we change that to a response that actually is more supportive, that is more compassionate, that actually gives us more grace. That again more aligns more with what your identity is becoming, right? Again, the identity that you're going to that you in the process of in the process of accepting too, right? It has to um I'm big on, the energy that you give it as you are, changing and things are changing. If you come at it with negative energy, you the output becomes negative. Your symptoms can become more intense. You become more frustrated. But if you approach it more so with a compassionate question like, okay, I you're uncomfortable with these hot flashes or you're bothered with this brain fog, whatever. What do you need right now? And getting into the habit of asking ourselves those questions and then doing those things that we need so that we can feel that we have the capacity and the energy to do the things that we want to do and become the identity that that we are becoming in that season of our lives. So number 4 is so number let me go back. So we're talking about, after reading this article, how our identity change happens and 8 mechanism. It talked about how 8 mechanism come into play when our identity is changing. And like I said, I felt that it was very relevant to what we experience in this menopausal transition. So number 1 was greater self-awareness. Number 2 was social networks. Number 3 was behavior change or changing your response to your symptoms, even changing your response to stress in your life. That's another big one that I talk to my clients about. Y'all know life be lifing, and there's always going to be some amount of stress, right? But we have to get into the habit of eliminating the stress that we can eliminate, and then respond to the stress that we're going to have regardless. Respond to that stress differently, so we won't intensify our symptoms, so we won't feel stuck and overwhelmed, right? So that's number 3, behavior change or change your response. And number 4 is improved self-efficacy. Now, it talked about our identity change being linked to the development of a greater sense of agency, control, and mastery. And self-efficacy refers to an individual's belief in his or her capacity to execute behaviors necessary to produce specific performance attainments. The key word here is belief. Belief. I did not actually get a client. I did not get my first client until I started believing that I am now an entrepreneur, that I am now a business coach. Before that, I would put out posts here, put out posts there. And at the same time, in the back of my mind, I'm like, that inner critic, girl, you ain't no coach. You ain't going, what are you doing? Like, so when that was, like I said, again, I was putting out posts and crickets, nothing happening, not getting a client, right? But when I changed the belief about me, belief that I actually can do this, belief that that's what I am now, right? Again, now changing that identity from being that I'm still a doctor, right? But now I am this business coach, and accepting that and believing in that and believing in my ability to do that and really impact the women that I wanted to work with. I had to believe that. And when I started believing that and creating more content and posts and putting it out there, that's when I started getting clients. So, with all of that, I think about what I teach my clients in my Menopause Moguls program when they are, trying to navigate their menopausal symptoms, now trying to transition into entrepreneurship. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made, right? But those decisions cannot be made if they do not know, like, and trust themselves. So that goes back to the greater self-awareness and self-efficacy, really knowing themselves, believing in their value, accepting the identity they are now, entering and becoming. That is when, when they know, like, and when they started to know and like and trust themselves, that is when they were able to actually then take the steps they needed to take to build the business that they have been thinking about, dreaming about for however long, right? So that is what I talk about in Menopause Moguls, really reclaiming your identity and really your authentic power, being who you are, being who you truly are, accepting her and being okay with her, no matter what everybody else says, no matter what people thought you were, right? There are people who always going to, have this a certain expectation of you because of what you've done before, which is totally fine. That's what you put out there. But now you now have to change that. There's some change to that. And being okay with that change and accepting that change and then putting that change out there. Again, being open to the evolution of you and putting it out there. That's when you're able, and that's what I teach my clients and coach them on how to do that so they can build the business that they want to do without feeling overwhelmed, without feeling like, oh my gosh, like there's so much confusion. So I know there's some of you who haven't made the move or took the steps um, to build your business because you just haven't accepted being a business owner, an entrepreneur, or taking on that identity. Some of you haven't been doing a great job of managing your symptoms of menopause because you haven't accepted the identity to even be perimenopausal. Because I know, when people think of perimenopause, menopause, like, oh my gosh, you old, you this, you that. Like, first of all, none of that is true. But because of that connotation, a lot of us haven't accepted that. But again, it all boils down to coming down to a decision. So I'm going to talk about all of that. Or a lot of that in regards to knowing, liking, trusting yourself in this transition in my free masterclass that I am giving on Wednesday, August 28th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. The masterclass is called Menopause to Mogul, Harnessing Your Energy for Business Success. And we're going to talk about those strategies that you need to um, uh, utilize in order to identify um, those parts of you to then accept the identity that you are becoming in this menopausal transition, in this transition into entrepreneurship. So we're going to talk about all of that in the masterclass. I'm also offering VIP coaching the next day on Thursday, August 29th at 6 p.m. for those of you who want personalized coaching specific to what you're going through, whether it's an identity crisis or identity decision that you need to make and that you need help with. The VIP coaching I'm also offering to give you strategy that's really specific and unique to you. So you can sign up for that also. So if that speaks to you, register. There's a link in the show notes. And the website is on, if you're watching here on YouTube, will be also in the show notes. But it is on my website, drjoyelle.com/menopause masterclass. Go there and register, y'all. I can't wait. It's going to be fire. I'm super excited about it, and I can't wait to see y'all in there. So that is the part one of identity crisis and how identity crisis can enhance your midlife journey. So I'm going to do a part two to this. All right. All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sticking with me. Please share, please subscribe if you have not subscribed. And until next time, but as always, love and light to y'all. And I'll see y'all next time. All right, y'all. Take care.